Hello, in this lesson we're going to talk about a story world on our real world and how they can coexist side by side using a sublevel structure, a bit like parallel universes. It's what we're going to see on the day when we shoot, and in theory what we want to see in the final image. Hey, welcome to Real Time Workflows. I'm MX Bell. I worked on Deadpool and Wolverine, Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, 1917, Hobbs and Shaw, Wheel of Time, Little Mermaid, No Time to Die, tons more. What you're going to get in the channel are my pro tips and how I use Unreal Engine to make films. So let's get started. Let's make some stuff. See you down the road. Right, welcome back to Real Time Workflows. I am MX Bell. We've been working on our trench site, so here it is. So far. Now, I've still got work to do, but what I've been adding in here are sort of set extensions, and as you'll have seen in the other videos, I've added some real objects, for example, which to cover up kind of holes in the scan. If we look at these here, there's holes in there, so I've added just some. And the way to do that is, you're going to get asset packs from the marketplace that suit the kind of. So if you've re-scanned a warehouse, for example, go and get something from the asset from the marketplace that looks like it could be part of that world, and you can kind of like start to fill in the gaps and things like that with custom or with off-the-shelf assets. So for example, here where I had holes in the rock, I've added some extra rock. It doesn't have to be perfect. Again, we're just talking about visualization. I've also gone in and started to think about like where I'm going to see. So for example, here I've added a character just so that I can kind of see. Now, here is we don't want the trees. One of the big things that I don't want in this level is these trees. Okay, so I kind of want to see how I'm going to turn them off. One of the ways I'm going to turn them off is as I've got over here. I start this place over here. If we were looking at the character, I've got a sublevel that's got my VFX kind of where my blue screen's going to go. Okay, so I know that camera angle's fine if that's where the blue screen is, but when I come in here, I know that I'm going to have a problem if this is my angle and I'm looking that way. I'm going to have to think about, I'm going to have to either not use that angle or do some other cheating somehow because I've got trees in the background. And what I want to avoid is any rotoscope around here to get rid of these trees. Okay, I want the tree removal to be nice and elegant. It's one of the major things that I'm worried about. So in actual fact, what we've got really is there's two versions of this world, right? There's the one that's actually there, the one that we're going to see on the day. We would add a lot of this stuff on the day. That's fine during the shoot. The art department will add all these kind of raising up of this. If I just turn those off, we can see where they are. So this is the real trench, and then I've added some extra geometry here which we can turn on, which is that's my story world kind of extension. I'm calling it, right? But what about beyond that? What about these trees and everything else and the land beyond? Well, I've added, because Cesium's not working, so when Cesium works again, this would just be Cesium. But I've actually, I've been into, I'm not going to explain how to do this, but if you want to do this, you can use Blender to get blended GIS, which gives you this, and it's an add-on you can use, and it will give you a polygon with a part of the satellite map onto it. I've chucked that into here to kind of, you can kind of see if I turn. If I hide that and I just turn on Cesium for a second, so hopefully it doesn't crash, we can kind of see what the real world looks like according to Cesium, but I want to keep Cesium off, so I've got this thing to replace it. It's doing a similar job, and it just means I don't have to worry about the crashes right now. Ordinarily, I would just use Cesium. But what it does have the advantage of is it's editable, which is going to come in, which is going to be important. So really, if we were down here at our trench site, we're going to come through we're going to crawl through our sap in the film. We're going to crawl through the sap, and I want a shot that kind of comes through here. We crawl through this hole that's been blown out, and I kind of want a shot that's kind of going to come up here like this and look over our world and kind of out here, right? It's probably going to be a drone shot. It's probably going to come quite high. Now, what would we see there? We're not going to see this. For a start, this is way too hilly for the part of the world where we should be at. It should be kind of flat. That's the kind of way that it was. But also what we're suggesting is that this is a very isolated part of the trench for both sides. The trenches should really kind of like, there'd be lines in the distance where we can see the trenches being dug in. Also, this would just be not just mostly flat, but there would be certainly no trees. It would be mostly like earth that has been blown and churned out, so it'd just be kind of muck and dirt and like kind of this chalky kind of stuff. So it's going to look vastly different. And so what I'm working on now, and what I want to go through in a video is this idea of a story world and a real world. So I renamed this. This was called I think landscape and foliage. It's where this stuff lives. I've named it Real World, and I've got another one down here which is Storyworld. Okay, so I can turn. They've both got a version of this object in the landscape object. But if I turn off, we come over here. I'm going to turn off my VFX, I think, not VFX, yeah, turn off VFX and turn off the trench, turn off that. So this is what we've got on the day, this is what we'd see on the day, and then this is what we would see once we've added our set extensions and things like that, more or less. Now if I turn off our real world and turn on our story world, we can see this is actually more like, or getting to be more like what we would see. So what I've done is I've added a largely flat, not completely flat, but largely flat landscape. So that's a landscape object that we talked about in the other video. Landscape object. I didn't want to remove this entirely because this object entirely because we do want to keep as much of what's shot as possible. You know, it could have some VFX applied to it, could be recolored, but I do want to keep as much of that as possible. And also because our landscape does because it does slope up, it makes sense that it continues to sort of slope up here. And so I thought it'd be a good starting point to keep that in, but then to kind of flatten it off so that like the bottom of our trench kind of here, where we get to the bottom, it kind of like flattens off, and we're saying that this trench has been dug into this kind of slight incline type thing. And then down here obviously is this is where our sap is, and we come up here. So what I've started to do is I've started to use the landscape tools to cut in where the extra trenches are. Now we're never going to come down here, right? Because it's entirely digital, but you can see over here I've done it as well. So in theory, when we're stood here, we can see that this trench is dug in, and we can do what we did kind of over here. I can add some more objects and stuff down to this, and we can kind of see them. And when the idea is if we were to come up, we would see this trench system that stretches off into the distance. Now, probably never going to get this high looking at this, but still, it's an interesting kind of it's an interesting thought experiment. That what we want to do is create this story world where these trench systems run off and along down here. Now the way I've done this is with the landscape tools, and I'm going to do some more of it now. As I said in the lesson on landscape tools, I like to use flatten. So for example, I've shaped this tool to look like this so that we can just dig in really hard here, and it'll just flatten this out. So if you come over here, we can see I've dug in these trenches, just rudimentary. Now, see, they're not very deep here, and what I did was I sculpted it down a bit here, so that we can push it in a bit deeper like this. So again, just taking the lines, taking at the point of where I first click, it's going to flatten everything out wherever I move the cursor. Going to flatten all that out along that path. Now, if I just zoom out here a bit, let me give it a bit more speed on the camera, not that much. Just zoom out up here, we can see kind of. Now, in theory, this would stretch over here as well. You know, the trenches would run like that, and they would actually run quite. You know, there'd be other ones that run down. Let's see if I can do it from here. Maybe I can't. So we would dig this down. So literally just going down. And the beauty of this is it looks pretty kind of natural, because it's obviously they're not straight, they're kind of bending around. This is how they would have looked. And there'd probably be another one, and then there'd be another one that cuts across here. Now again, we're never going to see these, not really from where we are. It's just we're just going to see suggestions of them in the distance. Now we can see that's not gone very deep just because of the undulations of the terrain. I can use my sculpt tool, and I can sculpt down to get a bit more depth. And then I can use my flatten tool to come in there and then run that out so that it just flattens everything out down there like that. Anyway, we're only doing this very roughly. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's just to add some suggestion of trenches that run off from our main one. So again, we're going to be looking at this from from here, right? So as long as we can just see, look, and we can just about see that they're in the distance there, you know, we get this idea that there's an entire network of it. I think it would be a good idea to actually have some more that come down here. So let's just do a little bit more sculpting down here, just to give this a bit more depth, and then flatten right here, like this. Sculpt a bit more down there. And we'll join these two up and then probably leave it there for now. Okay, so that's our kind of British version. Now I said I've got an asset pack that I can use now, so we're going to select Storyworld to make sure we're working in that. We'll go to selection. I've actually got this, so we've got World War I Trench. So I've got this World War I Trench asset pack, and I can just click on static mesh, and I get all the bits of stuff that come with this pack. Now, so one of the main things is going to be I could dock this down here, so we can actually come back to it. Let's bring this up a touch. So, for example, what we might have is things of barbed wire that are around like this. And of course, the other thing we could do is obviously we can do the same thing that we did on our real trench for extensions. We can actually run some of these down just to give the impression that there's once again a structure here. Oops. And we'll just give them a little bit of variation, so that from over here it looks like we've got a trench system that runs that way. You know, I'll fill that out more as we go, but the idea is that we want to be able to see that. And then we've got kind of like this kind of, here's our world, here's our story world. And then we can very easily say, actually, I want to go back to the real world, and here's what it looks like on the day. There is a version of it that's more advanced. So, for example, if I come up here, our story world includes this bit of, let's turn on Storyworld. So our story world includes this bit of the trench here and all the way down here. That's our story world. And then when we come down here, this bit's actually we come down here and into these bits. That's actually, we're going to double these for those. So effectively, this section here, this section is kind of going to go over here. And so when our characters come down here, we're going to be filming them in here. So there's a version of this where we could even go even further and say, actually, I'm gonna put all that stuff down there. But there's I explain why I'm not gonna do that here, because the reason for doing this visit is to sort of start to get an idea of what it is that we're going to see on the day. And if I were to move those things down there, it becomes very conceptual, because actually I'm not going to be able to see what I see on the day if I put a camera in this area, because it's no longer part of this kind of real world set. So really what this kind of real world story world thing is for is a direct, I mean, really, I think it's for when we're coming out onto no man's land. One of the main reasons for me doing it is like, if I'm here, what's that doing? If I'm here, and this is what I'm seeing on the day, and actually there's a lot more trees to come as well, I believe, if I remember rightly. Yeah, the trees come all the way down here, right? So I just haven't added those yet. But if I'm here and I can see trees all down here, and I can see all this greenery and whatnot, actually, I just want I want a reminder on the set on the day that actually it actually looks more like this. You know, this is what we're going to see in the movie. And so I just think there's in fact, you know, I mean, in an ideal world, to make it feel really World War I, you know, we would go cloud coverage 1. Like that's you know, in an ideal world, I think that's what it looks like, you know. Just this dense wall of cloud, very miserable, very grey. And we did that just by changing, remember, just by sliding this down, you know, reducing the amount of clouds in the sky, you know. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a kind of ultimately what I want it to feel like. And so that's the idea of a story world and a real world, and they can kind of coexist in Unreal if you use your sublevels correctly. Hope that was useful. Let me know if it was, and I'll talk to you down the road.